Today we're going to talk about a new feature within Adobe XD that I'm really excited about. I've already had a little bit of fun with it, and today I'm going to show you how you can use this tool in your workflow. We're talking about 3D transform. It seems year after year at Adobe MAX we always get a fresh new tool or feature within the software of XD, and I think this one's just really exciting. It's really going to push the boundaries of UI design and what we're capable of in the software. So we're going to jump into Adobe XD and we're going to design a music player utilizing this 3D transform tool. Let's jump in, see what we can do, and follow along. Alright, so we're at the start panel of Adobe XD and we've got our different options of how we can make our canvas size. It looks like they just added this Instagram story size. That's pretty neat. 1080 by 1920. We're going to actually go with this iPhone X XS11 Pro. It's probably the same orientation as this Instagram story because it's mobile, but we're gonna start with this. We are going to explore the power of XD. Yeah, I kind of stole that from this little section right here, but yeah, let's go ahead and start this up. And there it goes. We have our canvas made here. Notice that it makes the canvas, it labels it as whatever you selected in that previous menu. I'm just going to go ahead and label this home for now. It might change later as we design our pages, but for right now it's just kind of the way that I go about making the first canvas. I just call it home so that I know it's my first one. And then I'm going to go to my rectangle tool, top left right here. And let's just go ahead and drag this holding shift. If you don't hold shift, you kind of get this kind of wonky, not perfectly square rectangle. If I hold shift, you notice it kind of snaps. That's what we want. And I'm just going to kind of drag this out. And you can see here in my transform module, we're at 245 by 245 pixels. That's a decent size, but I kind of want to make it just rounded up to maybe 250. So if I click this lock icon, it'll keep these proportions constraint. So I'll type 250. Oh, that's 259, 250. And there we go. We have a 250 by 250 square. If you kind of move this around, you'll notice that we have these little guides that will indicate whether or not it's centered. So there we're perfectly centered. I like that. I'm gonna get rid of this border, and then I'm gonna put my fill just to a little bit of a lighter, more of like a gray, just so I can see my object. And I want to round these corners, maybe like a 3, because we want this to look like it's kind of like a vinyl record, and they're never, you have like a vinyl record, it's never perfectly square on the corner. There's a little bit of a bevel no matter what, because it's paper, eventually it kind of gets worn. So I think it'll look kind of cool if we have a slight little curve to that corner. And then I kind of want to add a little subtle drop shadow to this vinyl record. If we're trying to make it look kind of realistic, I think it'll help to have a slight subtle drop shadow. So we'll go over here to our right panel, our appearance panel, and we'll click this shadow selection right here. Now notice by default it'll give it sort of a, not the nicest shadow, but it's still a shadow. We're getting somewhere, but I think we need to kind of finesse this a little bit and add a little bit more realism if we want this to kind of pop and look a little bit more, well, realistic. So what I'm going to do is go here to B, which is blur, and I'm going to go ahead and type in, let's just try 45 and see what that does. So see how that kind of softens everything a little bit? It still feels a little too, I don't know, too fuzzy or too kind of, I can't really see it that well, I guess is what I'm trying to articulate here. But we'll click into our shadow, this little guy right here, and we'll just drag this up a little bit, give it a little bit more darkness to it. Maybe like a 35. And then I also want the shadow to have a light source of like up here. So I want the shadow to almost kind of drop down below the card and not appear as if it's just kind of flat straight on. So I want it to come down on the y-axis. So I'm gonna go ahead and go to my y-axis and just type in 30. Now you see how it pushed it down? So it kind of looks like this card is being lifted off the page a little bit. And I think maybe this is a little bit too dark. I'm gonna come down a little bit to maybe like a 20, 25. That looks decent. That looks decent to me. We might have to fine tune later on, but for right now, this looks like a cool elevated floating card. All right, cool. So we've got our nice square vinyl record. Obviously, this is not a vinyl record itself. It's a square. The actual disc would be within this kind of behind it. This is just serving as like the sleeve. You know, like when you're on Spotify, you see this square album artwork. That's basically what this is representing, is the actual packaging of a vinyl record. But I think because we want this to appear as if they're shuffling, like we're shuffling through multiple albums, we need to create a few more of these. So I'm just going to call this album 1. And then I'm going to option drag, make a second one. Now notice that this one's on top. I'm going to just drag it below. I'm going to call it album 2. And I'm going to line it up perfectly and then just go up. Oh, hold on, that's not perfect. Quick little trick too, if you want to make sure that things are perfectly aligned, come up to this top right section and here's your align tools. So I'm going to align center and align middle. Now they're perfectly stacked on top of each other. So I'll take album 2, I'm going to hold shift and I'm going to click up on the arrows. So 1, 2. So now that's perfectly 20 pixels from this next one. I'm going to duplicate my album 2, copy, and then Command V, paste in place. And then I'm going to move this duplicate underneath and call it album 3. So now I have an album 3 underneath album 2. I'm going to do the same thing, move it up 20 pixels. 1, 2. So now we're starting getting a little bit of a layering effect. It's kind of hard to see with this, but I think when we tweak our shadows a little bit more and we add a little bit more depth, you're gonna be able to see that shadow. It'll be a little bit more apparent. And then I'm gonna do that one more time. I'm gonna duplicate album 3, so copy, paste, move this to the bottom, call it album 4. We're just kind of creating a stack, a nice little layered stack of our boxes essentially. And I'm gonna move them up. Cool, so now we have 4 albums that are stacked right on top of each other. So XD in the past was kind of limited like this. You'd have to, if you wanted to simulate something coming at you, you would have to scale this up. So see, I can kind of do this where I like scale it up and kind of fake it so it looks like these are in perspective. So it's possible to make this effect happen, but in order to take it to that next level, to get more realism, to get more of that depth, which is what we want, we're going to use the 3D transform tool, which was just released this month. Oh, actually, it was October. We're in November now. So let's see if we can take these cards and put them more into a realistic environment where maybe they live in a 3D world where we can manipulate them and slide them and drag them and they actually feel like they're responding to our touch in a 3D space. So let's actually bring these cards to life a little bit and populate them with some content. Everybody loves saying content these days. Anyways, let's grab this first card and I'm gonna start adding my actual some of my favorite albums of these times right now. I've been listening to a lot of kind of lo-fi, kind of jazzy, just kind of background music that has a lot of like groovy vibes to it, I guess you could say. I don't know. During these pandemic times, I've been just having to listen to chill vibes to kind of keep myself sane. And I think when I'm designing and keeping my head down, this is like the perfect backdrop music for me to just kind of get my flow on, get my designs done, and yeah, okay, we'll leave it at that. Anyways, this is a band called Dirty Art Club that I love. You should check them out. They've got some really awesome album artwork, as you can see. So I just literally just dragged that on top of the image. XD is really good about just drag and drop, making your life easy. So we got that first one. For the second one, I'm just gonna select my album 2, and let's do Monster Rally, another one of my favorite artists these days. And I'm just literally just plopping these right on. Got a little Tori Ma, and then we've got some Karangbin. Cool. So this album's actually kind of white looking. That's why you can't really see it. Here, I'll preview it. But they got a lot of cool colors on their album artwork. So anyways, so we've got our albums here. I'll just make this a gray so you can see. Yeah, so Karangbin's in there. I think what could be kind of cool for this is that like as we shuffle through these cards, maybe the more dominant colors of this album artwork populate the background color. So maybe that doesn't make sense when I'm saying it, but I kind of want this whole background canvas to reflect this album artwork. So every time you swipe, you're actually kind of put in a a world of that album artwork. So let me just show you. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab my rectangle tool, top left, and just drag this all the way down. And just make sure it fits to my canvas. I'm gonna call it album 1 BG. Just to, oh, I spelled that wrong. Can't spell today, guys. But I want these layers to relate to each other so that I know that they go together. I'll go ahead and get rid of this border. And so back to what I was saying, I want this to reflect this album artwork. So what I'm gonna do is go to the fill, and I'm just gonna pick the more dominant color of this album artwork. So maybe this like green is kind of cool. So that looks pretty cool, but I kind of want to reflect some of these other neat colors like this yellow. So if I go to my fill, right now it says solid color. I can click this drop down and go to linear gradient. And I can really play around with two colors here. So right now we have our lighter green, which we've selected, which I like. But for the second end of this gradient, I'm gonna use my color selector, my color picker, and then just click this yellow. Now we're getting that kind of cool gradient from both, more dominant colors of this composition within the album artwork. All right, this is looking good. It's looking groovy. I'm digging the colors. I think now it's time to get into the 3D transform, guys. I'm pretty excited about this. So what we're gonna do to enable this is we're gonna select all 4 of our album artwork. I'm just gonna shift click off the background. I don't need that for 3D. I'm gonna keep that sort of a flat layer. But now that I have all 4 of these selected, as you can see in the top left here on my layers panel, album 1, 2, 3, and 4 selected, we're gonna come up to this magical transform tool. So if you look at this panel right here, this is your transform panel. We're gonna click on this new icon that was added at XD called the 3D transform. So I'm gonna click this little cube, and as you can see, it added this new little gizmo, this kind of little like spherical, icon here that indicates that you can move this around in 3D. See that?
Wow.
I'm just kind of moving this back and forth. It's kind of fun to do if you just play around with this and just kind of see how you can kind of flip things over and get really crazy with it. So the goal for this interaction is to make this almost appear as if you're looking down on these records. So you have a top-down perspective and you're sorting through each one. So almost as if you were at a record store and you're kind of flipping through with your fingers to go to the next record. So to achieve that, I'm going to select all 4 of these, and I'm going to grab this little top part of the gizmo. See this little arrow? If I hold it down, you notice I can change the perspective. So it almost looks as if we're looking down on the top of it. So once I find a nice perspective that I'm happy with, I'm just going to go with this -50. You can see up here in the transform panel. That's a nice round number that I can stick with. So I'm going to show you how easy it is to actually use auto-animate with this. We're gonna animate this first record to kind of swipe down and go to the next one. So what I'm going to do is duplicate this artboard, holding Option. Just come over here. We have an exact copy. And then I'm going to move this where I want it to go. So I'm going to move it straight down, and I'm going to change the perspective a bit so it's kind of coming at us a little bit and rotating towards us. Again, I'm going to find a nice value. I think 80 looks good. So when it gets to the bottom of the screen here, maybe it kind of sits right there. Now I need to tell XD what behavior I want for this to happen. So I'm going to select my first card, my first record, and I'm going to go to prototype up here, this tab at the top. And see how it selects, I'm selected on that record. I'm going to grab this little blue arrow and then bring it right over here. Now these two are connected. So I still need to tell XD what has to trigger this interaction to happen. So I want this to move down here. I'm going to come up to my interaction panel and I'm going to click drag. So basically what that's doing is it's saying if I drag down on this particular artboard and this particular object, it'll basically tween it down to the bottom of the page. So let's go ahead and test that. So I'm clicking and dragging, and look at that. We have a nice perspective of this record kind of coming down to the bottom of the screen. So I'm literally just dragging this up and down. So that's looking pretty cool. It's actually moving in 3D space. But what I think needs to happen now is the next cards need to shuffle up. So this needs to go in the exact same position as where this one left off. So what I'm going to do is just go back to my design tab up here, and then I'm going to select the first card because I want to take the same properties that this one had to apply to this Monster Rally album. So I'm going to select this, and I'm just going to look at this. So we've got 46 for our x-axis. It's hard to say x-axis. And then we have our y as 189.73. So I'm just going to copy that because that's more of a difficult number to remember. I can remember 46 pretty easily, but we'll select this and we'll paste. I actually didn't even have to touch my x-axis. It was more just the y. So that's basically going to the same exact position as this album here. So I'm going to do the same with these other two albums. Okay, so now they're basically all moving up about 20 pixels. I think it's about 20 pixels. Yeah, 20 pixels each. So let's see what that looks like now if we preview. Make sure you select your home screen. So this is looking pretty good, but we still need this background color to shift as we swipe this first album down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this background, Command C and then Command V. It'll paste it right there. And let's go ahead and just let's move this over so we can see what we're doing here. I'm going to grab my color and then grab my first part of my gradient and my eyedropper, and let's just sample some of this pink color here. So we're getting some of that pink. And then I'm actually going to go to my second part of my gradient and then maybe sample, I don't know, what's another good dominant color here? Maybe this green? Something like that. Maybe not the green. Maybe we do this like yellow. I like the yellow more, I think. Feels kind of tropical and, you know, just groovy, I guess. I've been saying groovy too much, guys. I need to stop. But now we're gonna move this. We're gonna actually move this to the bottom, and I'm gonna label it Album 2 BG. And then let's just move it right back over because we want it to be exactly behind our Album 1 background. And on this particular artboard, I'm just gonna turn this opacity all the way down because I want it to be like a smooth fade. There's already movement happening on screen with the albums moving around. We could do like a slide where this kind of slides in, but I think a nice subtle just fade will kind of work well with these gradients. So let's go ahead and preview that. Go to my first artboard, click the play button. Let's just drag this down. There we go. So you get a nice kind of subtle fade as we sort to the next album. I like this. All right, so now we need to make our third swipe happen. So I'm going to duplicate this artboard, just drag it over here. So I'm going to grab my second album, go to prototype mode, and just connect this artboard to that one. And now I need to move this one down. So we can move it down here. I'm just going to match up where it is on top. And then I believe this was -80. Yeah, so we want to copy this property. So -80. So that it has the same angle as it comes down. Just make sure we move it back up. And then this album, the first album, should kind of just come off screen at this point, since we're shuffling it out of screen. So let's go ahead and test that real quick. So we got this one coming off screen, and then this one coming off screen. So see how they're kind of shuffling now? And you have to make sure that when you apply that second interaction, go back to your prototype mode, that you have drag selected again. Sometimes this can get switched around if you're doing other things. So we want to make sure that all these triggers are all drag. Okay, so now we need to update this background to match this album. So what I'm going to do is copy my Album 2 BG, Command C, Command V, paste it in there. I'll move it over just so I can see my album. Go to my colors, click the first color of my gradient and then my eyedropper. And let's just grab this vibrant reddish pink. And then the second color of my gradient, eyedropper. And then I could do this like yellow at the top left corner, but because we already have yellow on this one, I want there to be more of a dramatic difference in color for this transition. So I might grab like a purple down here or something. Maybe not that one, but There we go. Just a value that I think will be a little bit more dramatic when you get to it. So let's slide this back over. Let's rename this to album 3 BG. We'll put it below album 2. And then we'll go to our album 2 background and just turn it 100% off. And let's just test that. So we're dragging from here to here, and then from here to here, and see how we're getting that nice kind of subtle background change as we flip through. That's pretty sweet. So now I'll make the 4th card swipe interaction, and I'll probably speed this part up just because you've already seen this. So let's go ahead and preview that. Let's just make sure that all of these are connecting right. So we'll swipe down, swipe down, swipe down. Nice. Now we need to make sure that we can swipe back up. So in order to do that, I'm going to select these cards at the bottom and just push it back. So let's test that. Yeah, there we go. So we're basically just kind of connecting the loop of these artboards. So just in case you want to swipe back, you totally can. So we're doing some cool stuff with this 3D transform tool already. I think what I want to do now is actually give a little bit more context to an actual UI of what this could look like. So maybe adding some like a play button and some next and back buttons and the song title and all that. But I think what could be cool is like when you click play, maybe one of these albums, well, I guess the album that you're on when you click play could actually kind of rotate towards you and then maybe scale up and kind of come closer to the camera. I'm not really quite sure yet, but let me build out this UI. I'm just going to kind of speed through it. If you want to watch more UI design tutorials where I actually build out every element, I've got a few of those. But in this case, we're talking about 3D transform. So I'm just going to do this really quickly, and then we'll get to the next 3D transform segment within this tutorial. So I'm going to select my master component of my play button. As you can tell, I made these all components. And this is the master because it has a filled in diamond. You can also see it up here in this component panel. This is where we're going to have the interaction happen, where we're going to click that play button and it's going to trigger the next interaction of this album moving around. So if we come up to our component panel, I'm going to click this plus button right here. We're going to add a state. This is a little bit more complex, so if you don't follow, I recommend you watch my other component states video that I'll link down below. We're going to add a new state, and we're just going to call it tap, because you're going to tap on this play button in order to trigger this interaction. So now that we've added that new state, we need to duplicate this artboard. I'm just going to drag it right below. Now with my component selected and my tap state selected, I'm going to go back to my prototype tab up here. You'll see that I have the ability to add an interaction to this tap state. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to click this plus right here. We've got our tap selected, and I want this to be an auto-animate. Now here it says destination. I want to select this home-4 to be my destination for this interaction. So I'm going to go ahead and click this and go down to my drop down and find it. There it is, home 4. And let's just preview that. Let's just see what happens if I tap this when I click play. Nothing happens because I didn't make any changes. So let's close that. And this is where we can actually manipulate our album artwork right here to do something different. So let's go back to our design tab, and notice we still have our 3D transform selected. So you have to make sure that you have that option selected. And then let's just go ahead and just play with this and just maybe rotate it a little bit towards the viewer. Maybe it comes at us a little bit. So I'm gonna go ahead and test that. I'm gonna click this artboard, click play, and then let's click our play button. Look at that. We actually have some nice dynamic movement happening. I'm gonna try that one more time. Wow. So that's looking pretty buttery. And the reason why it's so buttery and smooth is because if you can see on my actual component, if I go to my prototype tab again, I have it set to auto-animate. It's going to this artboard, and I have it ease in and out on this actual interaction, and then my duration is 9 seconds. So the combination of the ease and out and the 9 seconds really makes it feel a little bit more premium and just subtle. If I go to like say like a 1.1, it's gonna be way too fast. Watch. See, it just snaps too quickly. So this is something that you can really play around with and just kind of see what works. But for me, I like this 0.9 seconds. It just really gives it that premium, nice, subtle interaction. And there you have it. It's a pretty awesome tool that I think it's going to be really fun to use more and more. I would love to see how you guys are using this in your workflow, how you're really kind of just taking things to the next level and giving it that extra polish. So feel free to share them with me in the comments down below. Would love to see them. Thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Maybe you learned something, maybe you didn't. If you did like it, if you did enjoy it, maybe give me a like or subscribe. Otherwise, don't.